On June 24th, 1967, 10 cavers entered a small crack at the base of a limestone rock face in Yorkshire, UK. Their names and ages will be in the video description. What they had just entered into was a cave system known as Mossdale Caverns, and it's one of the most dangerous caves in the world because it is several miles deep, and for several portions of it, the average height is only 10 inches and the average width is only 2 feet, meaning to traverse through it, you need to be on your stomach, pulling yourself with your fingertips and your toes to get through. So these 10 have been in the caves for several hours now when they reach a point called Rough Passage. Now, up until you get to Rough Passage, you can get through the cave on your hands and knees. You don't need to do any belly crawling up until this point. But after Rough Passage, you come to a section known as the Marathon Crawl, which is a 900-foot section where, again, average of 2 feet wide and 10 inches tall. 4 of the cavers decide they want nothing to do with this, so they turn around and get out of there, emerging from the cave at about 5 p.m., at which point they noticed it has begun sprinkling, but it's just a light sprinkle of rain, so they're not very concerned. A gal by the name of Morag Forbes, who was engaged to one of the 6 men who was still in the caves, who had gone through the marathon crawl to continue exploring, she decided to stay near the cave in an abandoned barn to wait for them to come out. They should have come out by about midnight. The other 3 went to their vehicles and drove back into town. By 9 p.m., there was a full-on torrential downpour that had been happening for quite some time. There's a thunderstorm now overhead, and Morag headed back to the cave to check on the entrance to see what was going on. And she was horrified to find that the entire cave entrance was completely flooded and underwater. The creek that was running in front of this rock face had overflowed, and it flooded the entire cave system. So these 6 men who were down in the caves, they made their way all the way through this marathon crawl, at which point they would have heard the terrifying sound of the cave beginning to fill with rushing water. At which point they all 6 turned around, got back into the marathon crawl, and were desperately trying to pull their way inch by inch 900 feet back towards the entrance, but knowing there was hardly any hope. It was several hours back to the surface. When rescuers found them, all 6 of them had drowned in the marathon crawl. One of them, a young man with the last name of Ogden, had found a small fissure he'd crawled up into. He would have been the last to die. He wedged himself up in this fissure until it eventually flooded.